Welcome to everybody. I'm Vaishali. I'm the lead consultant at Atma, and very happy to be hosting this webinar again with Girish. A little bit about Atma webinars. It's an initiative of Atma that's been running since 2017 as a space for exchanging knowledge and expertise in the sector. There's a lot that goes on, and we wanted to create that free space for everybody. And we take on a variety of topics across many organizational development areas. And you can find all our past webinars on our YouTube channel with dedicated playlists. So I'll share that link as well. And today we have, of course, Girish with us, who's the founder of Rahi Impact, which is a platform for connecting and supporting India's nonprofits and social sector professionals.
Hello, everyone, and lovely to meet many of you who I know names of from emails, some of you who I know, and many of you who I don't know. So lovely to meet all of you. My journey began with corporate consulting, where for 4 years I was learning how to structure problems, how to drive communication, how to say things in a clear way. So I did that with McKinsey and Company. जिसके बाद I moved to People, an education nonprofit. And I was working as part of the leadership team for another 4 years, जहाँ पे it was like using all that I learned for something that I deeply cared about. And from there, I went on a career break, which is when I started Rahi Impact, which has a basic idea of saying ki, can we do some experiments in the social sector that can help the nonprofit sector get stronger? Which is to say, for example, this benchmark report that you're seeing, there is a YouTube channel video podcast called Rahi Impact Journeys. And the idea is to say ki, yeah, hum sab, we want to make social impact happen, whatever organization we are in. Can we collaborate and can we make things work better by learning from each other? And finally, a year into my career break, I also started working with Dalberg Advisors, which is a development sector consulting firm, which, and like Vaishali said, I work with different types of entities towards the question of how do you help serve people who serve the world. So what I'm hoping we'll be able to do today is to, one, give you an idea of what benchmarking is and how you best can use it, share an overview of the actual report, and let's talk a little bit also about इसका मतलब क्या है खुद के लिए और सेक्टर के लिए, both for ourselves and for the sector. What does this mean? How I thought we could do it is maybe I'll spend bas 10 minutes on what is this report, कि ये कहाँ से आया, क्यों बनाया, कहाँ से, कैसे समझे इसको, कि इसका प्रेरणा क्या था, and then move on to let's walk through the report together, ताकि it becomes easy for you to understand. It's a 120-page report, but such bole to you'll actually need only like 5 to 10 pages of it when you actually get down to it. And finally, we can also, as Vaishali said, spend time on Q&A. And this is going to be a little bit of a cognitive load, like thoda dhyan se sunna hoga. And so for those who stay till the end, I have a little surprise waiting for you. All right. And I mean it. I actually have a surprise for you. So let's get down to it. So what is this report? It all began in 2022 on this WhatsApp group called HR for NGOs, where I was at People and we needed to do a compensation benchmarking. As you know now, I'm not from a HR background. I was in a place where I had never understood that there is something called benchmarking. And so I asked on the group saying, does anybody have a benchmarking report? Because apparently we are looking for it. They were like, no, it's not there. And then I proposed that, well, if there isn't a report, क्या हम खुद से कर ले क्या? Data तो हमारा है. Ultimately, if you can, I'll put a survey together, you give me the data, I will play back the insights to you. Because when I spoke to the consultants, they said that they need 3 months to do it. They need something like 10 lakhs to do it. And we have to make the connections to the peer organizations who they will benchmark. I'm like, data हमारा है, सब कुछ हमारा है, तो analysis तो मुझे करना आता है. So why don't I just do it if you give me the data? When people signed up, that ended up in the first report, which had 64 organizations that joined in, and we made a report. But naturally, we only shared it around to the 64 participants who joined. And then 1.5 years later, I was sitting in a train, and I think the fourth person had messaged saying, "Hey, have you, are you planning to do the benchmarking again?" So I was like, finally, kar lete hain. So I literally borrowed a laptop from somebody else in the train, and I set up the form, and we had the second edition go. And this one, a lot of the participants were like, listen, can't we make this public? I know this data is useful for us, but can we also have the same data available for others? And so got permission from all the 100 participants of this report. And we put the public version of the report out. Many of you may have seen that, and that's been out since 2023, 2024 early. And now we have the third edition, jahan pe we had 90 organizations participating. And this is the version that we will be speaking about. What makes the report special? I think one, it is not something that is taken as a paid engagement. It is meant to be, it's a voluntary effort. It's meant to be rapid. We very quickly take the data and turn it around. It's inclusive because, as Ashish from Shikshart said in the first year, he was like, the weather from Delhi or the weather in Delhi and Mumbai should not determine the climate of India. So and so it's been something very important for me that we try to make it as inclusive and clear कि सारे के सारे लोगों को इससे फायदा मिल सके. Um, and third, I think it is community driven and it's yours because every time the survey is designed, it is not designed by me in isolation. I send it out and be like, क्या ये ठीक है? Does this work? What do we add? So every year it gets better because people are giving inputs on how to make it better. And I'll also voice over some of the things that have changed in this year from last year's. Also, if a little plug, I am expecting that at some point we will do another version of this report. Every time I do it, it's so much work. And I'm like, I'm not going to do this again, but I'm pretty sure I will do this in a couple of years. So if you would like to join, please drop an email to rahi.impact@gmail.com. Along with the compensation benchmark, there's also onboarding practices benchmarking. There's a public report available. There is another report available on travel policy because kitna rupees per kilometer dena hai is a question that just kept coming 7 times. So I was just like, let's do a report. So all of that is available. And the idea is how do you learn from or how do you leverage that? So how is the report made? First, there is putting out outreach. The beautiful part was this time it was not just me screaming into the void saying ki bharo bharo bharo. A lot of people also joined in. A lot of people amplified the message ताकि इस बार बहुत सारे organizations थे जो पिछली बार नहीं थे, right? And unfortunately, there was a parallel benchmarking exercise that an organization had started just before this went live. And so a lot of organizations could not join who were earlier in the previous version. What organizations actually filled, the HR or the leadership team essentially filled this form. Jahan pe we'll go through what it contained, but basically they self gave their data, right? And उसपे audit नहीं हुआ. ऐसा नहीं था कि I triple confirmed that what they said is right, but एक validation तो हुआ था कि if the minimum is looking more than the maximum, they got an email saying, listen, this is not right. What is this, right? Or if the salaries seemed very off, there were many issues that we worked on in data clarification. जिससे finally हमने ये report निकाला, right? That's been the story of how the report has been made, just so you get an idea कि this is based on self-provided data. This has been done in its third edition, and this is meant to be helpful to each and every one of you. What I will do now, if that works for everyone, is let me go through the actual report. We will actually go through the report and actually make sense of it for ourselves कि इसको कैसे पढ़ना है, इसमें क्या है, right? So let's get going. Here's what is about the document. There is already, by the way, many of you would have seen it, there is a 12-minute video which explains कि इस report को कैसे पढ़ा जाए, and what you're going through is more the intensive class version of that. But ऊपर level से कैसे पढ़ना है, कैसे use करना है, वो इस video में है, जो आप देख सकते हो. So the report has these contents, right? So there is a quick start guide, which is basically saying that how do you actually read the report? Then comes the participant profile, which is to say who gave the data, And what are the different types of organizations that are involved? Why is this important? It's important because you need to know, ki, am I comparable? Is my situation comparable to these organizations? Third is, then comes the actual benchmarks, right? You have the compensation level benchmarks, जिसको तीन अलग तरीके से काटा है. We've looked at it in terms of annual budget size, by scale of operations. Ki, are you a local district level operator, or are you a national level operator? And by operating model. Are you digital only, right? Like all your efforts are digital, versus you work within somebody else's system, like you're a Teach for India working inside a government system without your own infrastructure. Or are you an institution, like you run a hospital, or you run a school, or you run an institution? All three of them will have different cuts. And the third is, so by annual budget, scale of operations, and operating. उसके बाद आता है around compensation policies benchmark, which is what are the increment ranges and the benchmark of compensation practices. So a question that a lot of people want to know is, what is the increment that is planned for this year? कि कितना percentage increment दे रहे हैं, right? So giving answers to that. Finally, the benefits benchmarks: leave, insurance, wellness allowance, right? All of that, what is the benchmark? Is bar, based on feedback from last time, we have a whole separate section on leaves. क्या हुआ था कि it's very hard for you to understand how leaves are set up across organizations, because you have to look at the information together. ऐसा नहीं कि सिर्फ sick leave या casual leave को देख के हम पूरा picture बना सकते हैं. So this time we ask some extra questions so that you can really understand how leaves are created. Finally, इतना ढेर सारा डेटा जो मिला है, जब उसको देख रहे हैं, there are some insights that come out, some things that make you reflect for the sector. So that has been put into this section, and then some closing thoughts, right? Including acknowledgements, including pay as you wish, etc., etc. This is the overall structure. So it's a 120-page document, like you would have seen, probably 130 now. But simple सा चीज है, decide what you want to do, and उसके हिसाब से go to the correct chapter, and then just look at what you need to look at. So for example, if the question in your mind is, how do I set salaries? Focus on the compensation level benchmarks. If you're looking at increments, go to the increment benchmarks. If you want to improve your policies, like salary scale lagana hai, or is it time for us to think about headquarter versus regional cost separate, like salary changes? So then you go to the compensation practices benchmark. If you're thinking about what I have 500 rupees per person extra budget, मैं इसको कहाँ पे लगाऊं? Do I put it on L&D or do I put it on wellness? For reflections like that, go to the benefits benchmarks. And whoever you are, I think if you're interested in just thinking about where is the social sector and how should it evolve, then you should check out the broader insights and reflection section. So one last piece before we dive in, how do you understand एक page में क्या है, right? Like it's a 120-page document. How do you know where you are and where you should be? पहला चीज, on the top left, there is a small gray chapter tracker. On the right, usually there is like this yellow highlight that keeps moving across the chapter. So within the subchapter, which section are you in, you can be clear. The actual slide content is in the slide, and there will be some information. In many of the pages, you will see this lock ka symbol, because this is information that we left in the participant report. Because they gave their data, because they took the step to actually share additional information, they deserve to get something extra. And so what we have done is two things. One is they get the report earlier, and they get much more nuance and detail, including like actual quotes of what people said, etc. All of this as an incentive that next time more organizations continue to join, right? Because otherwise you have the free rider problem, कि सब सोचेंगे कि कोई और कर लेगा और फिर मैं public report देख लूंगा. And at the end of the day, this document is to be used only for inspiration, and it ultimately is just a tool that you use based on your strategy. Your strategy comes first, and then the document comes. Now we come to the real deal, actually getting into the benchmarks, right? हमने ये पूछा था, what we asked 5 types of things, right? Which we asked actually multiple types of things. Ki, what is your annual budget? What is your team size? What is the age of the organization? Legal entity, is it a society, Section 8 company, trust? कैसे टाइप का काम करते हो, किस थीमेटिक फोकस है, ऑल ऑफ दीज वर आस्क्ड. उसके हिसाब से वी हैव क्रिएटेड दिस सेट ऑफ एनालिसिस. मैं यू नो सिंथेसिस में बोल देता हूँ कि एट द एंड ऑफ द डे what has who do we have mid to large sized NGOs who are decently institutionalized. We don't have a lot of um, grassroots non-profits the way that I see it, कि मोटा मोटी जो आए हैं वही लोग हैं जिनका बेसिक बेसिक प्रोसेसेस सेटअप हो गए हैं, and who are running in a quasi corporate structure from the way I see it, largely in education, health, environment, and rights advocacy inclusion. This is the type of organizations that we have. And there is a good spread of organizations in terms of operational footprint, कि district level पे काम कर रहे हैं all the way to national level पे काम कर रहे हैं. Operating model, which is, as I was saying, do you run your own institution or do you run digital services? And an important point is most of these organizations have their headquarters in a city. In fact, 36% of them have their headquarters in Mumbai. This has been that doesn't mean they work only in Mumbai. It's just that that's where the epicenter is. And if you look at who they actually work for, it is across the board, but with some bias towards urban areas. So 42% of the organizations work only in urban and semi-urban or semi-urban areas. We have only 10% of organizations, which is only about 9 organizations that claim to work in rural areas. तो ये है, and the reason I want to say this is, I think, to Naresh's question also, it's really important to know who has given the data, ताकि you can decide whether it even is relevant for you. You could simply say that यार ये तो मेरे ऑर्गेनाइजेशन के कॉन्टेक्स्ट से जुड़ता ही नहीं है, it is not relevant for us at all, and that's also a possibility. So now coming to the salary levels, this is an important slide. I need you to really understand कि हमने क्या पूछा था, and उसके हिसाब से decide how to interpret the data. What we had asked for is every person who filled in some information which is here. For the roles which is CEO, ED, founder director, COO, director, department head, tenured manager, early tenure manager, senior executive, executive field associate. इतने सारे levels है. In these levels, we asked them कि आपके organization में इसका title क्या है? The gross salary in INR lakhs, minimum, maximum, and typical or average. And what is the typical years of work experience that you have? ये पूछा था for the program and leadership roles. And similarly, we asked the same for the support functions. इस बार हमने हर support function को बस 3 level में divide किया. Lead, lead or head, manager and associate. और वहां पे वही सवाल पूछे थे कि what is the title, what is the salary range, and what is the work experience. This was done for finance, fundraising, communication, HR, MEL, and IT support. With this information, these are the benchmarks of the salary levels. Let us take a minute to look at them. You can see ये है for 40 lakhs to 1 crore annual budget के organizations का page है. Just so there are many pages like this you'll see in the report. This is one example so you can really absorb what it is. 40 lakh to 1 crore वाले organizations के लिए, if you're looking at how much do typically a senior manager gets, you can look at, okay, the average salary that you see is about 5.2 lakhs per annum. The median, which is to say, if you order all the information, उसके center में जो आता है, it is 5.1. And the range that we see, the minimum that we've seen in the data is 2.7 lakhs per annum, but it can go all the way up to 8.4 lakhs per annum as well. ये कितने ऑर्गेनाइजेशंस का डेटा है? ये 6 ऑर्गेनाइजेशंस के डेटा से बनाया हुआ है, ठीक है. But does this still make sense with respect? When I think of senior managers, I'm thinking of somebody with 6 years of experience. If you look at the typical work-ex, all of this data comes from people who are 4 to 11 years of work experience. So broadly, it is in range. So maybe I can think of this as a reasonable answer. And we also have put down the typical role title so that we can get a sense of whether this is in line with what we are imagining. Same thing, there are 3 pages initially, which is for the program and leadership roles, and 2 pages for the support roles. And जहां जहां पे data नहीं है, हमने बस दिया नहीं है, right? Whenever you have limited amount of information, we have only provided what is possible to give. So that's it. The only thing you need to know is that one, it is self-reported, it is validated, not audited. थोड़ा बहुत force fitting तो हुआ है because this structure was given to everybody and they put whatever they could fit into their structure. Every organization is structured differently. तो हो भी सकता है कि it's not a perfect match. In many cases, we have only samples of 4 organizations, 7 organizations when you really come down to that data point. And some people may have given data before their appraisal, some people would have given it after appraisal. And sometimes all of the elements like contracts versus full-time employees, pro bono teams, ये सब capture नहीं हुआ है. Wherever we mentioned that it is where we've seen that it is not a typical contract, उसको avoid किया है. But this doesn't capture that reality. Let me pause here. मोटा मोटी यही है in terms of how to read the compensation levels. And from here, it gets easier. This is usually the toughest part. Any questions from your end? And this is maybe a time that we can take for discussion. Yes,
Hi,
Dipesh.
Girish. I just wanted to check. So, in the way that you have defined the nomenclature for the levels, so let's say
Mhm.
I was submitting my data, is there a descriptor for each level in terms of complexity, scope, skills, just for me to peg my roles or levels against the way you've described them?
It's
Yeah,
not. I think the important thing to understand is that this has always meant to be a dipstick benchmark. See,
got it. Got it.
this is never a substitute for there are consultants who will actually they will pick the 5 organizations that are most similar to you and they have to do a detailed analysis of
Right.
role matching kya hai, uska level kya hai, all of that. Now,
Hmm.
that when you have one organization that's working in education and another organization working in environment, and they both
Hmm.
have to give the data, you have to abstract and simplify at some level. So the
Understood.
approach taken here is mota moti ek idea diya jaye, because otherwise wo data hota hi nahi hai, and often the consulting
Hmm.
engagements are expensive, they take some time.
Correct. Right. Hmm.
Not every organization can afford that. So that's
Right.
kind of it.
Got it. So this is a reasonable fit against what the market, the number of levels, and generally the number of the role structure that we would see in the ecosystem. Thank
Exactly.
you. Thank you so much. Yeah.
And again, I think the one ad from the last time. Last time, what we had not asked was the title in the organization. And इस बार we added that so that people have some sense कि at least title देख के थोड़ा correlation हो जाए, whether this suits the sort of titles that I am imagining,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
And what you'll see is in smaller organizations, usually the titles will be fancier initially, even for mid-level
Hmm.
roles, right? So tenured managers will be like deputy director, director type of names. As you
Hmm.
reach mid-size, it kind of stabilizes in terms of roles that you would expect. So that was asked this time kind of to capture that, because otherwise it's hard to be sure that what you're seeing is roughly the same.
Got it. Got it. Thank you. Thank you so much for that.
ठीक है. So इसमें in this section, what you actually have is 3 different types of uh, cuts. First is by the budget size, which is what we've just looked at. Now, the second is by operating model, which is to say there are 5 types over here, as you can see at the top. Key, do you own your own facilities? Are you embedded in others' facilities? Do you work in a field-based situation where you deliver by outreach or community teams but don't have a fixed venue? Fourth is digital first, कि online करते हैं. And the fifth is intermediary, where you're either a grant making organization or you are a intermediary who supports the ecosystem. And तीसरा cut है by scale of operations, going all the way from local. And by the way, you can see the definition of each of these against which it was done over here on the top left. कि local है, multi-district है. You work in one state, but pretty much 80% of the districts in that state. Or you work in multiple states, but mainly at the district level. It's mixed and you work in multiple states. You work in multiple states at large scale, national or international mandate. So that's what we have. Now, how do you choose which one to look at? Do you look at the organizational budget or do you look at which of these geographical footprint? I think honestly, you'll have to look at both. I would lead with the org size and then cross-reference it with one of these. So just for your full context, I tried to also do the cut कि org size cross the footprint. But तब क्या होता है, बहुत ही छोटा sample set होता है. And then in this, even when you have 90, there was not enough volume for us to give reliable data about the specific double cuts. And so it's not there today. Hopefully, we have like 700 organizations participating next time. You will have enough to give more detailed benchmark. Of course, important to realize key numbers are not everything. As we all know, in the data, when we're looking at it, you can see that the organization ka actual how much salary they're able to give is dependent on funding realities, not on HR policy. There were many organizations which said CEO salary zero bracket, no money to pay. So things like that are also there. Interestingly, there was also the case of an organization which was sharing that they got a sudden infusion of a lot of money. So it changed their trajectory and their position in the scale, in the org budget scale. But that caused a lot of disparity internally. So the old timers still are getting their previous salary while they have hired, they've recruited talent from the ecosystem at a higher premium, right? So now they can afford talent that comes in with a greater salary. But uske karan, when I look at the salary data, you could see that it's very strange. Both the titles and the salary levels were looking very different. And so I had to ask them saying, what happened here? So the internal pay parity was broken when they suddenly got a lot of funds. Third is, of course, there were a lot of organizations where they don't necessarily have everybody on payroll. There are organizations that are running entirely pro bono as well. And again, as I must emphasize, the survey was done in English and it was done online. And so in this round, we have largely been able to capture organizations that are more formalized, that are able to engage with such a structured digital survey in English. There were actually 5 organizations that filled the data, but the data was not usable. So I had to remove them from the list because they hadn't understood what was actually to be done. Coming onwards to the compensation practices benchmark. This is possibly of interest to everybody. I have to confess there is one mistake in the survey here. I don't know why the yellow background is looking like this. I think the data changed. I was highlighting something else earlier, so the yellow should not be where it is. I don't think we need the yellow. But broadly dekha jaye, to how much increment are you planning to give this year? It's around 5 to 6% is the minimum. Maximum is 10 to 15%, depending on what you take. So 10 is the mode, 15 is the median, and 17 is the average. But the typical increment, as you can see here, largely stays within the 5 to 15 range at max, right? Hovering primarily around 7 to 10% of base salary. At the same time, we can't take one single number to explain what is happening. So there are nuances, there are greater detail that you need to be aware of. One, usually there is a performance component to the increment that organizations are giving. There is a differentiation where junior roles get higher percentages and more senior roles get lower percentage because of the base effect. More and more people are using structured performance rubrics to determine increment levels. Uh, of course, promotions bolke people were getting 35%, but that's different from the increments. Many times, because they don't want to be taking the burden of the higher salary in the next year with unclear funding, um, they also think of bonuses instead of increments. Some of them say that this is done based on inflation, etc., etc. Usually, it seems to be April to March cycles. This is all we could gather from the data. Naresh, I'm not sure I understood the question. I see your question on the chat. Would you like to come off mute?
Yeah. So I'm looking at the median mode average figures. I just
Yes.
am so I mean from a median to an average computation, the number looks a little higher on the average side. I just wanted to understand like how that happens. Like across the board. So min, typical increment and max, all three figures look higher than the median. Now, I generally like whenever I've seen these reports, the numbers are fairly comparable, like not widely different, and usually the median figures tend to be on the higher side of the average or be more than the average. So again, just wanted to understand like how this figure has been computed here. I hope my
Okay.
question's clear.
No, is it about a specific, is it about only the max increment, or in general, how was this calculated?
Yeah, in general, like how have
Okay.
we arrived on the average figures and how have we arrived on the median figures? I understand the basic of what median is, what
Okay,
average is, I get that, but
got it.
the
So
numbers just a
literally,
little different.
okay, got it. So literally, they were asked a question saying what is the minimum increment, maximum increment, typical increment, just like we've asked for salaries, right? People were asked this question, they filled the data, and based on that, wherever they again clarified whether the data is correct, wherever the minimum and maximum were not provided, which sometimes happened, it was assumed to be the same, right? Like minimum, maximum, and average were taken as the same figure. वैसा कुछ adjustments करके then it was just done. These statistical averages were done.
Got it. This helps you. Thanks.
Yeah. But I think the takeaway, the most common value that was seen was, naturally most people will say that their minimum increment is 5 and maximum increment is 10. So the most common value that was seen was 5 to 10, which is what you can see in the mode. And the other two, you can see there is a little bit an effect of people who filled increment for promotions as well. And that is pulling up the number a little bit. I think that's the way to interpret the information.
Got it. That helps. Thank you.
ये जो 25% यहाँ दिख रहा है, I'm pretty sure I didn't get a chance to review it with the organization, but I'm pretty sure that is a promotion that they have tagged as an increment.
Yeah. Cool. This helps. Thanks.
Chris has asked a question saying, why have the budget cuts been taken like this? So that's a good question. What was done was, again, last time, I think it's to do with what is the sample of organizations that we had available. I ideally wanted to keep the bucket the same every year so that you can compare over the years. But what I was solving for was, one, making sure that हर bucket में minimum 5 से 8 organizations हो, right? So that nobody has their data exposed in some way, and at the same time you are able to provide meaningful data in a way that is available. In this time, when I have said 30 crore plus, that also goes all the way much beyond 30 crore, huh? Just so we are clear. The highest value is pretty big. I don't remember the exact one, but it is, I do know that we have over 100 crore, if I'm not wrong. Earlier, there were, I think, 4 organizations that were more than 50 crore, and we kept that as a bucket. So that's kind of what was taken this time. And if I remember correctly, the center of gravity this time was closer to 50 lakh to 5 crore or 10 crore. And so you'll see more cuts at that level compared to last time. Like I said, I think some of the organizations which would have made it to the larger bucket this time could not join. And so we had, you see that the center of gravity has moved. So you can see here, you see minimum of 7 in every bucket, right? And that's kind of how it's been cut. I hope that helps.
Yep. Thanks, Girish.
So increments are just done. We're halfway through, everyone. So pat yourselves on the back. Now it's easy. The rest of it, I don't think I even need to explain. I'll just tell you what's there. There are a bunch of things that organizations do beyond just fixing salaries. There are processes that they follow. I just wanted to check how many organizations have robust processes and where are they in their journey of evolution. And a special question a lot of people want to know is around variable pay, right? Who do you give variable pay to? So these are the questions that are given, which is, do you have an appraisal process? Do you have salary scales? Do you have a competency rubric? Do you differentiate between headquarter and regional office salaries? Do you make adjustments for cost of living? Is there variable pay for fundraising? And is there variable pay for non-fundraising roles? Interestingly, while a lot of organizations think about, I've had many conversations with many organizations where the leadership team is thinking about how to bring in a good fundraiser, and clearly it's very hard to find a good fundraiser. And often the conversation comes, how do we think about variable pay? Interesting to see that still it is a very small percentage of organizations that have variable pay as a fixed component within the fundraiser's job description. You will find simple pages which give you the synthesis of each of these headers that you looked at, right? Which is what are we seeing today in terms of where is the sector across each of these aspects. And that's that section, right? In terms of benefit benchmarks, exactly the same. Looked at the most common benefits that people want to know about: gratuity, medical insurance, work timings, or flexible work timings, dedicated learning and development budget, PF, work from home or hybrid work, accident and multiple types of insurance, accidents insurance, term insurance, wellness benefits, logistics support, ESI, right? This seemed like the universe of things that people care about. Ask them yes, no, maybe questions and got more detail from them. Again, some of the finer detail is missing in the public report, but I think this is still good enough. Wherever the same question had been asked 2 years ago, I've included the data. There was not too much to analyze or too much to take away from there, so don't bother too much with it. But it seems largely similar in terms of the spread. So I wouldn't read too much into it. So that's the benefit. Easy to read, easy to understand. Like I said, and this is what I'm quite excited by, the leave policy benchmarking. The fun thing was that this time we were actually able to do a decent job. So there are three types of leaves that organizations have. Most organizations, or a majority of organizations, have what you would expect. There's casual leave, privilege leave, sick leave, with each of them having exact number of days and specific rules around how they should be used. But there are also organizations which say, take 25 leaves. You don't have to tell me what for, but you have fixed number of leaves you can take as and when you want for how it works. And the third type of organizations, which I love, there are a few organizations which say, we don't have any leave policy. Kar lo jo karna hai, we trust you, right? So you take as many leaves as you need, as long as you get the work done, we're okay. Now, there is further detail around the leaves, which is saying, categorize them into core paid time off, statutory leaves, and special leaves, right? Because you don't necessarily need to have a bereavement leave or a marriage leave on an ongoing basis. Organization may not have policies yet. They might just be riffing at the moment, but good to know what all is there today. Again, I'm not getting into the content because you can read it. Happy to talk about anything if you find it important, but just sharing with you what is here. Further detail about each of these is provided, which you can read. And the last point of interest in leaves is around compensation, comp off, and about carry forward. कि कितना comp off देते हैं, कैसे देते हैं, and how do you do leave carry forward, encashment, etc. Here's what generally people have said that they are doing. And that's it. This is three things that I found important to share, which is one, what you can see which is also natural given the type of organizations that we found, but also important I felt to call out कि लोगों को लगता है कि बड़े एनजीओज में सैलरीज बढ़ते हैं, बट इट्स इंपॉर्टेंट टू अंडरस्टैंड कि वो बस सीनियर रोल्स के लिए होते हैं. If you look at a associate, an individual contributor in any organization, मोटा मोटी उनका salary levels similarly दिखते हैं. Right? There is some mild increase, but as you can see, it's not significantly different like you would imagine. Now, the question is, yes, leadership is important, and these are often people who have come into the sector when they had other options. But it is also an important question saying, how do you ensure that the talent stays? Like I was sharing with some organization that had reached out as they are thinking about expanding for the cost of hiring one senior, leadership team member, they could increase the salary of 75 teachers by 10,000 rupees, right? And it should be an active, conscious decision saying which one matters more and where do I lie in terms of the ethics of that. Second, this might be interesting for some people who are thinking about designing their organizations. Also just mapped out what is the percentage of budget for CEO salary and CXO salary, right? The first line and second line of leadership. Naturally, in smaller organizations, it's a large percentage, which gradually goes down over the sizes until it's a small percentage of the large budget. A lot of organizations in the smallest scale often have CEOs who are doing pro bono. Then comes, what is a grassroots NGO? This was a question that I put in almost as a sneaky thing because I was curious. I asked the organizations, does your organization consider itself a grassroots NGO? People gave yes, no answers. These were the only choices. What's interesting is, naturally it has, or thankfully it has reduced in terms of percentage as the geographical scale increases. So a multi-state NGO does not necessarily consider itself a grassroots NGO. But I found it curious that still, when you talk about state level or national level work, you still have at national level, you have 25% of organizations saying that, हाँ हम grassroots NGO है, which is fascinating because for us it's we all want to be grassroots. And one of the conversations that I had in the Rahi Impact Journeys podcast is what always comes to mind when I think about grassroots, which is this point that what is grassroots? Ultimately, it's that the distance between your work and the people who your work affects is minimal. The less space there is between the two, the more grassroots your nonprofit is. And so for me, that's always a question saying, how do you define whether you are a grassroots nonprofit? Finally, we also ask them, what are your biggest challenges and what are your best practices you want to share with others? And here is a summary. As you can imagine, it's hard when you're attracting talent. First, there is a mismatch between the skill and the pay. Second, you have to solve for not only competency, you also have to solve for mission alignment. Like you might have the best talent, but they're not interested in social work or socially relevant work. And then what do you do? And the third is location, right? Whether you're in Mumbai or whether you're in, Gorakhpur, the question is the same, saying, I am limited by the location aspect of the job. I can only take people who are interested in coming to the location where I work in. And what makes it difficult for people to retain talent? First is very often, especially at the mid-level, they hit career ceilings or they are itching for progression. They're not getting the progression that they need and they leave. Second, there is competition, not just from other organizations that are similar, but also from folks who are not similar to you. Malab, let's say you are a practitioner, you will then have these people who've gained experience go off to consultancies or they go off to foundation roles or for-profit entities and which are able to afford greater salaries. And third is, as we all are aware of, burnout, because this work is hard, or finding it hard to see progress. कि मैं थक्का मार रहा हूँ, मैं रोज सर फोड़ रहा हूँ ये करने में, but ultimately I'm not seeing any impact. तो इसका मतलब क्या है? And on the other side, what are things that people say they do or they recommend that you do. I will start from the bottom, go to the top. They say that things that really help your organization stabilize, sustain, and grow is one, ensuring transparency and shared ownership. Very often, when it comes to salaries, it's not about the salary itself, but about the process by which you are communicating the decisions and how involved they feel in the organization's journey. Second, ensuring कि समय समय पर you're able to give them feedback and you have performance reviews that happen. And third, be not doing bait and switch कि बोल दिया फिर और कुछ रोल दे दिया. Upfront being clear कि यार हम 6 दिन काम करते हैं. This is not a 9 to 5 job. जैसा भी हो जो भी हो, ensuring that you know that upfront so that the right people join with clear eyes कि this is what I'm walking into. And going up, ensuring that there is space for learning and capability building, ensuring that there are growth pathways and mobility. When people get bored in their roles, there are ways for them to explore other roles. For example, हर चीज promotion नहीं होना है. You could have someone who is very good at program operations move to HR operations if they are interested, right? So there are many ways in which you can handle that. And third is normalizing well-being, right? Health is more important than your social life, and relationships is more important than work. And reminding people that it's a marathon, not a sprint, and giving them time to recharge, right? All of these are what help people stay in organization. More detailed quotes over there. And finally, a last section of closing thoughts. These are all the organizations, or most of the organizations, that contributed their data. So huge thanks to them. Huge kudos to them for responding to my many emails with data clarifications. It was a massive effort. So thank you so much for cooperating. A lot of people who have both input into the survey, couple of volunteers who helped ideate, make sense of what the right data to analyze is, what visualization could look like, as well as amplified the reach of the survey. Just about what went into making the report. And another experiment that I had done, which I do for all the reports, the report is freely available for you. And it's just, since this is a voluntary effort, if to create a public good, if anybody would like to contribute towards the creation of that, they can support with a pay as you wish. That is just a standard feature of all Rahi reports. And it closes with some public goods that you can also look at. As I was sharing, there is a YouTube channel or Spotify channel with a video podcast. There is the benchmarking report of onboarding practices and of travel policy. It should be a little outdated now. It's 2024 February, but it still may be useful in some parts. Let me pause here. That's the report. Thank you, everyone who is still awake, for hanging on and engaging. I think there was a question on the chat before we move forward. Ridhi from
Yes,
Pradham Book had
Riddhi has,
asked,
yeah,
yes.
Riddhi has asked, is there any data on how salary increments in small organization compare with inflation rates?
The short answer is no, but if you think the analysis should be what is the typical, like take the small organizations, look at the salary level, salary increment levels, and compare it with inflation rate, I can try doing that and add it to like a version of the public report. It's not there currently, but that's a very nice thing.
Yeah.
Is inflation rate easily available, by the way? Sorry,
Yeah, it would be available. Hi.
okay.
It's just that I am a fundraiser at Pratham Books, and I've been dealing with a lot of how there's grant-based budgeting that happens with an organization. When I'm fundraising, I'm not just fundraising for the beneficiary, but I'm also fundraising for the organization and the budgeting that happens for everybody. And your data is pretty spot on, I must say. I was comparing it to our organization's thing, but yeah, I just in terms of how we see the market and how we see small organizations dealing with, because these are human beings at the end of the day, and the sector is very intensive in terms of labor, whether it's emotional or physical. And I do feel like we do need to compare it to the market level and the for profits as well. The P word in the non-profit sector is like hated, the profit word. But I feel like inflation is rising. We do have families, etc. So that comparison should be there in one's mind as to if they want to make an industry change or if they want to make a change in terms of roles or whatever. So once you have that kind of thing in front of you where you can compare, I think it becomes your report will become much, much more like efficient in decision making for a lot of people in terms of their career, etc.
Yeah. No, thanks, Rithi. I think it's a matter of quite some debate, just how people look at non-profit roles. And like somebody said, वहाँ उसे मतलब किराया दे नहीं सकते types, right? So yeah, no, I hear you. Let me see if I can pull this data up. I mean, I have the data. I just need to figure out a way to
I
put it.
would be more than happy to help you out as well. Like
No, it's
I
fine.
would,
No, yeah. If
yeah,
you can just drop me a line, I'll get in touch with
yeah.
you.
ठीक है. Thank you.
Thanks.
Yeah. So I wanted to understand, like, when I'm looking at my organization, so what do you think it's the best practice when I want to compare my salary range, if I have to plan increasing the minimum and maximum salary range for my organization? So should go by location wise from the Rahi impact report, or annual turnover would be the best practice? What would you suggest?
Does anybody else want to take a crack at this? क्योंकि I have created the report, but use जो कर रहे हैं आप सब लोग हो, right?
Yes.
Genuinely, right? I can my answer would be कि आप budget से शुरू करो और फिर cross reference करो कि is it matching up, right? उसमें adjustments
Okay.
करो. Because usually, yeah, at the end of the day, all our salaries are determined by the budget that we have, है ना?
Yes.
So it might, and so usually I would assume that it boils like budget would be more consistent. That said, एक बार check कर लो दोनों पे and see what is the best way or what fits. But others, anyone who has already used either the previous report or this report, if you want to share any details.
I think
Yes,
Girish, you
Sunil.
already mentioned some of it. There is no one perfect way to benchmark our own salaries. I think we have to look at the broader report. You mentioned budget, then there could be whether this organization or any organization, is it single district? Is it working in digital? Does it have its own programs at grassroots levels? So on and so forth. There are so many components in this report with so many different variations. Okay, one has to look at it in totality. In fact, I think I was going through the report, and there is also different causes, okay, where these organizations are working in. I mean, they're in health, they're in education, etc., etc. So there is no one perfect answer. But when I'm looking at this report, I'm trying to look at this in a broader totality, and then figuring out what suits the organization, eventually coming down to the budget.
Yes. Thank you, Sunil sir. So I would like to add to the point. So even I was doing that. I was trying to compare with the annual compensation and as well as with the mixed state wise, because we are like all over India. We are like working in pan India, but the difference was quite uh not matching with whatever we were thinking. So I wanted to understand if we can have, or yeah, at the end it is organization decision which they want to select, which they feel is more appropriate according to their policies and donors management. Yeah, so thank you.
But Radhika,
I
one
think
thing, I don't think we have
yes.
geolocation in the report. Just so we're clear.
No, we had a mixed state one where the organization in one state and we have multiple districts working on employees working in
But
multiple districts.
that's about sizes. Matlab,
Yes.
scale of operation. So that's what we have, because Rachna's put on chat, and that I agree with. What is most useful, if we have it, which we don't, is कि उसी
Correct.
city में या is उसी town में कितना देते हैं, which of course.
Yes.
good
Yes,
way to-
definitely.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Radhika. I'm just keeping an eye on time and people's interest. Vaishali, if that's okay, should I just move forward?
Yes, I think if there are no more questions, We can go ahead.
Girish,
Girish,
I just
I have
have
a quick
one
question.
question.
Sorry. Amazing.
Sorry.
Yes.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
So my organization, Project Tech for Dev, I went through, like, my question is on the compensation benchmarking. We are a remote organization, and
Yeah.
I went through the budget, etc. But we are a tech forward
know.
organization, right?
Yeah.
So what would you suggest? How do I look at this report? So I've
True.
already put it in the chat also, that I already have salary bands for
Yeah.
the various roles that we are hiring. And if I want to compare that salary band to the bands which have come in the report.
They would be very off. So is my
Yeah.
sense. Donald and Tech for Dev have actually been great supporters from the beginning. And so I remember my first conversation with him was exactly this, saying, wow, the salary of tech roles versus non-tech roles is so different.
Yeah.
So it's very important to realize. So one, and this is for everyone in the room, in case you are hiring an actual developer or a tech team, their salaries are going to look very different. Because think of that as a specialist role, which you will not be able to fit it within your existing organization salary bands. कि अच्छा manager ही तो है, product manager तो manager level पे लाता हूँ मैं, unlikely to happen in a stable way. So I just want to share that with you because the salary levels and there were a few that had come in. I have removed those wherever it was very high, and I know the org has a tech component. I checked with them whether they did it for tech roles or non-tech roles, and I have removed the tech ones from this, which is one of the limited or like important things to know to mention, right? All the data that is here is for typical organization or management work, I would say. Yeah.
So are you saying that the data which Tech for Dev submitted
For
on the salary front is not considered? Okay. Is there a similar report available that can cater to, like, tech organizations? And just looking for some more references.
I hear you. Does anyone of the 53 other people in the room, anybody knows any tech-oriented benchmarking reports? And I'm slowly learning to not say, let me just do it whenever ideas like this come. I personally don't know of any, Diana, but
Okay.
yeah. And yes, I very distinctly remember having to delete that. I left it for the senior levels because they were still similar, like the leadership levels. But I removed it for the manager and below because it was just very off. Yeah.
Okay. Thanks.
Thank you.
Hi,
Sunil had a
Girish.
question. Nidhi, I see your hand and somebody else is unmuted, but let's just go in order. Sunil had wanted to say something.
Yeah. No. If there is some time, and if you could still deep dive into, the especially when we are cutting between early tenure managers as well as early tenure associates. If you have time, if you could little bit cover more deep dive into it. Were there some titles which you didn't include them while putting these basics?
Uh, So, okay, let me actually I'm very glad we're talking about this because this will also help you be clear on the limitations or what you should be careful of when you interpret the data. As I was sharing with Natasha earlier, it's based on people's understanding of the data that is given. And an input that I received this time is I've created a video about the report itself. I can probably create a tutorial video about how to fill the form, which can help people fill the form properly, right? So that was a good suggestion I got this time. So in terms of this, in terms of your question, one, there were people who reached out and clarified isko kaise dekha jaye, right? So if they have only one manager level, like it's a smaller organization, plus 3 level hai, what was done is they either divided their team into two parts where they have more tenured people and less tenured people and split it into two parts. Or they filled only one row and left the other row blank, right? Or filled it as 000. So depending on how they wanted to look at it, usually the senior manager would be filled and the junior they'll skip. And when I look at the titles, uske hisab se I'll get a sense of what they actually meant. So just for context, this was all extremely manual work, right? Like this was not AI generated output. It was manually having to figure out whether it broadly makes sense and like looking at the story of most organizations to see if the story is adding up, right? So यहाँ पे, for example, let me actually use a different example since we're anyway looking at it. Let's look at, okay, let's look at 1 to 2 crore organization, right? So here we are able to see that well, CEOs, there are multiple titles, right? Managing trustee, chief functionary, all of that. I have removed one outlier CEO salary, which for 1 to 2 crore per annum, it is off, which is 75 lakhs. So it was changing the averages quite a bit. I've left it in so people know that is possible and that's not wrong. It's just to do with the nature of the organization. But this is the average. When you come to the tenured manager, early tenure manager, you can see from the names, right? Senior manager, senior program manager, program head, program lead, right? But also senior analyst, senior associate. That's what they call them, right? But salaries largely come within a understandable range where the average comes to 8.8. So the variation is from 3 lakh per annum. There might be one outlier sitting there, all the way to 12.1 lakh per annum. That's the range that we see, which has been centered into 10 and 8.8 as the average and the median, right? So this is the way to read the column. And
No.
by the way, so the if you see the minimums, you will actually see there are some organizations which then don't have too many of these levels. यहाँ का जो 0.5 है, it might be coming from a different organization that gave the 0.8. Yes. Does
So I'm
that?
glad you showed me this example because I think I didn't look at, and I could now see that you have got different variations of role titles in different budget segments as well, which
Exactly.
I frankly missed because I was only looking at the budget where we are connected with. But when you showed me this example, I think it's pretty neat that you have, I think you did mention in your talk that budget role titles could differ from even budgets
Yeah.
from organization to organization. Thank you. Thank you, Girish.
Thanks, Anand. There's less variation when you look at the support functions, but in the programs, there often is quite a difference. Yes, Nidhi.
Yeah, hi Girish. So my question is very similar to what Dinah was asking. So art is not predominantly a technology company, but we do have, we do have folks that are working for us for purely on tech support
Yeah.
roles. Now the challenge is because we don't have any comparison to make for within the NGO sector. Is it okay? I'm just thinking out loud here because we have 50 plus people here. Is it okay that we create a separate category for them when it comes to, as in we keep them as normal corporate high salary structure for them, and for the rest, the NGO sector, the structure? Can we do that ways? And if we do that ways, then I feel very, very bad for the rest of the folks in my organization because it's not fair. We are all working for the same cause. So how do I go back and
Understood.
pitch this to my founder?
I will give a short answer and then over to the others, whoever has a point of view.
Yeah.
I'm going to give you a very clinical answer, right? I mean, I'm not getting into the ethics of this.
Okay.
So the way that you could think about it is that it is about the market rate for the person, right? Or for the role. It's as simple as ultimately, people who choose a certain path end up in a certain choose or have the path chosen for them end up in a certain market range, right? So for tech roles, you will have to pay a certain amount. What I would do in your position is I don't know at what stage you are at as an organization, but I would create a separate track itself, right? Like if you have different verticals. So for example, you've got support functions, you've got program design, program delivery. I would create a separate specialist track and have a separate set of salary bands for them.
All
But
right.
still define them, Now, if you don't want to go down that path, the one thing you could do, which still may not be enough given the salary differences, is just tag them one level higher.
Okay.
Right? Like,
Yeah.
but I don't know. Like, I wouldn't do that. That is not my preferred option. I
Yeah.
would create a separate vertical. And
Right.
as I was sharing before, it's not about the actual money. It's a salary. It's going to be about how you communicate it to the organization, because everyone gets it. They get that developers might earn more, but they need to be told that this is important for the cause, and nobody's going to be against the cause, right? That's why we are all in the sector.
Yeah. Yeah.
Hmm.
I I get that. I get that. Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
I think we had Natasha
Yeah.
hand raised, and then Chris and Azhar also. Azhar Ali sir.
Yeah, yeah. So I just quickly wanted to check, right? So just in terms of making this tighter, Girish, do you have any thoughts on creating smaller communities of practice? Because right now, if you look at the report, it spans sectors, it spans thematic areas, and different thematic areas, different causes, different issues have a certain funding ecosystem that they are,
Yeah.
they're mercy to, and it's a function of that, right? So education, for example, is highly cluttered, but also a very safe investment. So you will see a lot of big bets being done in education. So are you also thinking of maybe drawing up smaller communities of practice where we're making more sharper or more cuts of like thematic area, the specific skill sets that are required within that theme, and what is the collective effort of some of those core 20, 25 organizations come into impacting the ecosystem at large? Because one is just going beyond salary. If we had to talk about what is the kind of talent we are recruiting for, right? What capacities are we building in them? So can it become a larger question around how do we create transferability of skills? How do we look at capacities? Where are we hiring from, right? So how do we bring that conversations closer to our organization and where it's located? Any thoughts on just how you want to bring this slightly tighter?
One, philosophically fully aligned, right? Okay, this is not about the report itself, but my understanding so far has always been that, or has evolved to saying that we all want to collaborate, but the biggest sticking point becomes bandwidth, right? Because we are already doing so much. How do you ensure that you have the bandwidth to do it? So when I began Rahi, the idea was actually to be that flywheel which gives that extra energy to help collaborate. Because I'm really not doing much beyond ensuring that the movement gets going. But like I said, every time I do just this report, there is always a point where I'm like, I am never doing this again, right? Because it's insane just how dirty the data is when it comes in, and then how much you have to analyze. So in an equivalent way, starting a community of practice, it has to be done in a thoughtful way and with enough perspective. My worry is that often these collectives that happen will end up happening with really large organizations, relatively large organizations in the sector. And then the perspectives of what they need versus what a smaller organization needs will often differ. So the reason I also haven't gone down that path yet for myself is because I feel ill-equipped at the moment to represent, right? So it's still in a learning mode. At some point, I think the path will
Yeah.
emerge. But yeah.
Because I think you have a captive audience now, and I also think that you have demystified benchmarking a little bit, right? Because like you said, it's still something that big organizations can afford to pay large consultants who will again not understand the development sector. So job mapping in theory sounds great, but in practice is done. There's so much intervention anyway from our side. So if you've made this something that is necessary for us to do and a good practice to have, then maybe we build on that momentum a little bit and you allocate jobs to all the organizations in that communities of practice and say everybody brings something to the table. So then it's not just but
Okay,
something
then.
something to sort
Yeah,
of
no, I
think
hear
about,
you.
right?
No, so
Something's in it for all of us. So yeah.
I will take that. And I think the one big point of evidence is like most people have stayed for 1.5 hours, which I really appreciate.
Exactly. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
thank you for that, everyone.
Of
So it
course.
says a lot about Atma as well, by the way. So
Yeah. No, and what I would say is that, in the feedback form, there is a space, there's an open space. If you would like to support Girish in this very large endeavor, I think you can mention that and we can make those connections. Of course, I think all of you are already connected, but just in case, I think that's also the idea behind doing these webinars, so that this kind of conversation happens and then hopefully something more comes out, right? And yes, as Grisha shared his email, we'll also share in the a post webinar email. You will get the link to the recording of today and the contact list. And yeah, I think this is something that we all talk about, that we need to do. But I think what Girish, you've managed is you've shown that it is possible. And I think that
Yeah.
itself is quite exciting. So
Mm.
this is the this is the second webinar we're doing as the report comes out. And I think there's a lot more. Now we actually have, so as Atma, we work with so many NGOs, and people ask us कि क्या है standard, क्या है, and I'm like ऐसा कुछ है नहीं, but now we can say
Which is
कि
cool.
there is something that we can look at. So it is definitely worth that all of us pull in some more time, energy, and money as well in this.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Very, very quickly, Chris and Azhar Ali sir, if you could share your questions on chat, and maybe then we can go towards the surprise and then the closing.
मैम नमस्ते, मैं अजहर हूँ।
Yes. जी.
बेसिकली जो मैं देख रहा था या सुन भी रहा था,
जी।
बिग डोनर ड्रिवन बजट अलॉट होते हैं प्रोजेक्ट को लेकर के, और ये फिक्स अमाउंट हो गया कि आपको इतना ही देना, इससे ज्यादा नहीं देना। हम प्रपोजल में दे रहे हैं कि हमें इतने चाहिए, तो उस कंडीशन में हम लोग कैसे इसको देख सकते हैं आने वाले टाइम में कि इंक्रीमेंट वगैरह और जो भी फैसिलिटी है सोशल सिक्योरिटी स्कीम को लेकर के, वो फिक्स अमाउंट है कि 3 साल 4 साल के लिए उतना ही फिक्स है, उसके आगे हम जा नहीं सकते। तो फिर ये तो इशू खड़ा करता है सबके लिए भी, उसमें क्या कर पाएंगे?
जी, सच बोले तो मेरे हिसाब से ज्यादा कुछ कर ही नहीं पा रहे हैं। मतलब सबके सब शायद मानेंगे कि ये मुश्किल बात है कि हम सब, मतलब फंडर जो भी हो, मगर उनके जो भी रिक्वायरमेंट्स है उसी के तहत काम करते हैं ना। तो जैसे मैं बोल रहा था, हम बोल सकते हैं कि एचआर पॉलिसी से जुड़ा है सैलरी, बट एक्चुअली सच में सैलरी और बेनिफिट्स और सब कुछ फंडिंग से ज्यादा जुड़ा है। कि जितना फंडिंग है उतना हद तक हम बेनिफिट्स दे सकते हैं और सपोर्ट दे सकते हैं। जो हमने किया था, मतलब मैं एक संस्था में जब था, या मैंने ये देखा है, दो अलग अलग तरीके के सिनेरियो देखा है। एक था जहाँ पे हमारा बस 3 महीने का कैश बचा था, जिसके बाद बंद होना था। और दूसरा है जहाँ पे हमारे पास इतना पैसा था कि, और इतना अच्छे से काम कर रहे थे, ऐसे बोलता हूँ कि एफिशिएंटली हो रहा था काम, और 40% बजट बचा था, और फिगर आउट करना था कि किस चीज पर इन्वेस्ट करें। राइट। तो ये दोनों सिनेरियो देखा है, और जिससे बस मेरा बस वही रिफ्लेक्शन है कि हम ज्यादा नहीं कुछ कर सकते हैं, क्योंकि बस उस फंडर्स को ढूंढ निकालना है जिनसे हम जुड़ सके, जो हमारी समस्या को समझ सके और हमारे साथ चले। पता है कि ज्यादा यूजफुल आंसर नहीं था, मगर आपकी बातों से मैं बिल्कुल जुड़ता हूँ।
थैंक यू सर। ये पॉसिबल नहीं है कि हम लोग उनको उतना बजट दे पाए, क्योंकि बड़ी ऑर्गेनाइजेशन हमारी बजट को काट के छोटा कर दी कि हम इससे ज्यादा आपको बजट नहीं दे सकते स्टाफ का।
एक
तो
चीज तो शायद कर सकते हैं कि, मतलब ऐसा जो रिपोर्ट था, इस टाइप के रिपोर्ट हमने यूज किया है फंडर को दिखाने के लिए कि देखो, इतना तो देना देना मार्केट रेट है, मतलब लोग इतना दे रहे हैं। एक बार ये हुआ था, कोई था जो फंडर के साइड पे था, सीएसआर के साइड पे था, और वो बोल रहा था कि वो 10 साल पहले एनजीओ में काम किया है। तो वो बोल रहे थे कि अरे ये तो बहुत बड़ा सैलरी है, इतना कैसे दे सकते हो, ऐसा तो नहीं होता, जब मैं था तो बहुत कम सैलरी था। तो हमने एक बेंचमार्किंग रिपोर्ट दिखाया और बोला कि देखो, ये है, 100 ऑर्गेनाइजेशन का डेटा है, और इतना तो दे रहे हैं। तो नेगोशिएट करने के लिए एक डेटा पॉइंट के रूप में आप यूज कर सकते हो।
हाँ, मैं भी
ओके।
यही सजेस्ट करने वाली थी, और आई थिंक यहाँ पर मतलब चैट बॉक्स में भी यही आया है कि एक्चुअली एक और मतलब एक आशा भी करती हूँ कि आगे जाके फंडर्स भी मतलब ये सैलरी बेंचमार्किंग रिपोर्ट को देखकर ही आगे बढ़े, तो लेट्स सी, मतलब लेट्स सी, होपफुली इसमें और अच्छी चीजें निकल कर आएंगी, बट हाँ वो दिक्कत तो है। क्रिस का भी सवाल आ चुका है। We have some good data on budget size and operating model salary benchmarking. Have we thought of looking at the top 5 sectors in which non-profit operates, as salaries will differ for education compared to health, and also is appreciating your hard work. I think it's similar to what Nitash was also asking, and I think, yeah.
बट आई थिंक सबसे बड़ा मेरा जो लिमिटेशन है वो है मेरा नेटवर्क, है ना। माने कि बस वो ऑर्गेनाइजेशंस भरते हैं जो इस सर्वे के बारे में सुनते हैं और समझते हैं। एंड द बिगेस्ट गैप दैट आई हैव हैड इज दैट initially, I think if you look at the earlier surveys, a lot of education organizations would fill it because my network was largely education. And in the third round, a lot more organizations, a different set of organizations have filled it because more people are amplifying the message. But still, it's hard to. I was a little disappointed that we still got to only 100 this time. It was also during Diwali and compliance and all of that. So getting traction is hard. So at the moment, haven't looked at sector level work, but it can be done. Theoretically, if there is energy and time to do it.
Yeah.
And without further ado, let me
Yes.
get to the surprise. So you should know that I am not a fan of oversimplifying things, right? रिपोर्ट में मैंने कहीं कहीं पे भी मैंने ऐसा नहीं लिखा है कि यू नो हर एसोसिएट को 4 लाख का सैलरी मिलता है, right? The reason I don't do that is because it's much more complicated and nuanced than that. And so I didn't want to just simplify it to a single number. But I also know कि ये report पढ़ना शायद आसान नहीं है. So here is a small gift for you. With the suggestion of somebody who wrote on LinkedIn, they suggested that I create this little bot which can help you, where you can ask questions and it will only take from the report and it will answer questions that you have. Give me a second as I open it up. So what I've done is I've uploaded the report and given it some instructions in the backend ki kis hisab se isko bharna hai. What you can do is you can ask it questions like, for example, or I want to know the salary range for comms associate in a mid-sized NGO. I don't know. Hopefully, it will give me a decent answer. I've told it not to give me a simple answer. थोड़ा सोच समझ के बोलने को बोला है. Let's see. Ta-da! What do you mean by mid-sized? वो बोल रहा है. So one quick take is that for a 5 to 10 crore budget NGO, typical salaries go from 2.8 lakh to 6.4 lakh. The midpoint for this group is 5.2 lakh. Require 1 to 5 years. So pretty decent answer. And it's giving you a quick version of the answer and a more detailed one. Please do check it out if you'd like. And koi feedback hai to please let me know because I can change things in the backend so it works better. Yeah. But still, read the report if you can. You spend 1.5 hours learning how to do it, so it should be good. That's it from me, Vaishali. Back to you.
Great. No, that was wonderful. Thank you so, so much. This was, as always, extremely helpful and useful. And I think most importantly, it's setting the trend in the sector, which is what we are most excited about. And thank you for doing this painstakingly, hopefully next year also. And we promise that, I mean, something good should come out of this community. So you will not do this alone. And we should definitely talk. Thank you to everyone who's come today and stayed till the end. Do share your feedback in the form that has been the form link that has been given in the chat. And see you again in the next webinar. Atma webinars happen every month, and sometimes depending on how busy the month is, maybe two in a month or none. But do watch out for this space. And if you have any topics, or if you would like to host a webinar, these are all completely free. So do come in and we can have a discussion on what you'd like to also share. So yes, thank you so much and have a good day.